Good afternoon and welcome to the August meeting of the Murfreesboro Historic Zoning Commission. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Linda Anderson.
Here.
Gilbert Backlund. David Becker.
Here.
Deborah Belcher.
Here.
Rick Cantrell.
Here.
Paul Cross. Jim Thompson.
Here.
Mary May White.
Here.
Howard Wilson.
Here.
We do have a quorum, so we'll begin our business. Everyone should have received copies of the minutes of the last meeting in your packet. Are there any changes, deletions, or corrections?
I make a motion we approve as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as written and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please, with accepting the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We have then accepted the minutes as written. Robert, what is our first business for the day?
Well, the only thing we have on the agenda is it's not even really an agenda, anything where we need to take action on, but it's under staff reports and other business. Recently, the city began removing old bricks along some concrete sidewalks for inside the city. There's a portion of the historic zone that we have, and it's shown on the map board here in front of you, the large map board. Some of the sidewalks are in the historic zone, and most of them are outside the historic zone. Due to the nature of brick sidewalks, they tend to roll and lean and wobble and stuff after a period of time. The bricks start to deteriorate, and the city's been wrestling with this for a number of years. And just recently, they decided to just to remove the bricks because after consulting with the city attorney and the city engineer, they decided it was more of a risk problem or more of a liability problem for a lot of people that use the sidewalks when they're walking and running and with baby carriages and so forth. There's been some discussion as to whether the sidewalks should have been included as something that the Historic Commission should have looked at, but after talking with the city manager, city attorney, it was decided that the sidewalks were in the city's right-of-way, and in the city's right-of-way that's where the city manager has the ultimate responsibility for the maintenance and the safety of the citizen public within the city. And he decided that it was just better to take the bricks up and replace it with concrete, so it would be one layer of concrete. Mm-hmm. And there's I'm sure I'm missing something else. But that's basically what was decided. Like I say, there have been discussions and some letters to the editor in the newspaper, possibly that people in the historic zone weren't quite apprised of what was happening. But after lengthy discussion with, like I say, with the city engineer, city manager, they decided to do it this way. The bricks themselves they have been given to the property owners, the adjacent property owners, for them to have to do what they want. But the brick sidewalks have been taken up in some cases. I don't think they've completed the whole project they were starting, but they have started, and they are coming up and being replaced with concrete. And now this meeting here is for an airing of why the city did what they did. And it's up for general discussion, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the parliamentary procedures are, if I should open this up to the commission first. I know we have some members from the public here who would like to speak. I guess I would open it to the commission first to ask questions, and then we'll invite each of the members of the public who'd like to speak. And when we do, if you would come up to the podium and state your name and your address, and then we'll give you 3 minutes to air your thoughts on that. And then we'll have further discussion and go from there. So I open this to the commission for any questions you may have of Robert and the city.
Robert, I have a question. I wonder in this meeting with the city manager and the engineer, was there talk of other options besides concrete? What about other cities who have historic zones and the way they've treated sidewalks that had to be replaced, brick sidewalks that had to be replaced? What did you talk about?
Well, that topic did come up, and the gist of it was removing the bricks and replacing them with bricks so it would accommodate everybody, to include handicapped ramps, the ADA compliance. I guess the price was a little bit more cost prohibitive than what they wanted to spend.
Did they talk about concrete bricks, stamping of concrete?
Yeah, they talked about bricks, they talked about stamping, but like I say, it was a decision that the city manager made after discussion with the city engineer and the city attorney, and that's what they decided.
I know that recently, in the last couple of years, the city has used brick in some of their new work they've done, like along one of the greenways. And so, living in the historic district myself, I'm a bit upset and confused by this and why other options weren't pursued. I just wondered if you suggested some other alternatives to them.
Well, I mean, like I say, we talked about the different options, stamped concrete, bricks on top of a concrete base. But like I say, that's what the decision was.
I don't have any questions, Robert, but I do have some comments. What rubs me the wrong way is that the city did not approach this commission, discuss the issues prior to doing it. This really reflects what the county did with chain link fence along Lytle and University. Went ahead and did it, and we tried in many ways to get them to redo that. Of course, we don't allow chain link fences in the historic zone, but they felt that they didn't need to come in front of this commission. So now the city has all of a sudden decided that they needed to replace these red bricks, and if you can recall, about 4 years ago, we tried to get the city to replace the bad area along the 600 block and replace it with red bricks. They didn't want to do it at that time. They absolutely did nothing. And so we heard 4 years later, and all of a sudden, without any notification to this commission, they go ahead and tear these up and then say that, well, they had the right to do it without coming to us. So that really bothers me, that they didn't give us the courtesy as a commission, which is here because the city wants us to be here, to give us the courtesy of reviewing this subject and talking about alternatives. I want to add one thing to Linda said, that Linda mentioned about red bricks being used in the city. If you go to the Avenue, there's red bricks all over the place in the Avenue, going into stores and going into entries coming into the Avenue itself. So I'm really at a loss as to why there wouldn't be an option of using the red bricks. Anyways, but here we are again. It's been done. There's a number of people in the historic zone that are here today that are upset about it. I'm more upset that they didn't come to us and let us try to resolve the issue so that our people that are in the district could see that at least was being entertained.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question, and David, you might be able to answer this one. Where does our jurisdiction lie over especially, I think I heard it right, that part of this is outside the historic zone, or a lot of these sidewalks are outside the historic zone. Mm-hmm. So do we have jurisdiction over that area?
No.
I don't know. The commission's action would be limited to the area that's circled with the blue line there, and I think to some extent that runs down the middle of streets, and other extents it runs kind of along the fence line at between streets.
So some of the sidewalks were replaced outside, and then some were replaced inside. Is that correct?
The ultimate project will be that way.
Okay.
It
It's
just
not-
started.
It just started, so it's not, so have we gone inside the historic district already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think especially a little bit to the north along Lytle, and in that area, there are some brick streets, and some of those have been, I can't tell you exactly what's been done where, but I know some have been done outside the historic district, and some of those that are inside the historic district have been replaced.
I guess for myself, the concern I share with David, is the fact that we are approved as a commission by the mayor and the city council to enforce the ordinances and regulations of the Historic Zoning Board, and we were not consulted about this. What concerns me is you walk out this building onto the terrace, and what do you see but red bricks? You go down to the court square, and all the intersections, the crosswalks, they may be concrete bricks, but they're bricks nevertheless. And even the most recent project that I'm aware of with the city is the new trailway with the fountain out there at Medical Center Parkway that has brick around it, which I believe even the city manager was instrumental in that project, I believe. But it's strange to me that the city can put all this money into this, and in addition to that, irrigate down that median with all the plants and along Tennessee Boulevard, but not protect an historic fabric or material in our district. And we're here to protect the district, and we were not consulted. So I think there's certainly an issue there and a problem that we need to see if we can't fix and move forward on that. But that's certainly my concern. Anyone else?
And one other thing, I'll be curious to, when some of our residents speak about, the historic district is not that large, and if the city was going to do this, I'll be curious to see if everyone did in fact receive notification before the bricks were torn up in front of their house, because I think I've heard correctly that not everyone was informed, and I think it would have been nice if everybody in the district had been informed that this was going to be taking place.
Chairman Thompson.
Yes.
Is this program, I see at the bottom of the map, it says brick sidewalk replacement. So did the city identify a brick sidewalk replacement program?
I'm not sure if they actually said it's a program, but I think the city manager and the city engineer and the risk management went out and looked at some areas in town, downtown area, that have posed problems in the past. And they addressed it with, let's pull up these bricks and make it concrete. I don't think they have actually called it a program, but they went out and identified all of the sidewalks in the downtown area.
So it's more of a broader sidewalk replacement program based on the integrity of the walk, whether it be brick or conventional concrete?
And actually, I think there's some buckling of some concrete sidewalks that are going to be addressed also, in addition to some concrete ramps along Main Street and along some of the sidewalks where they come to where they intersect with the streets. I think some of the ramps have come in disrepair, and they're going to be repaired also, along with some of the brick sidewalks that are coming up.
Well, I have to echo what others have said. It would have, while it may have been in our purview, certainly would have been a courtesy to allow the Historic Zoning Commission to be a part of that. Had an individual gone in there and pulled up the brick, I think we would have had the same reaction had it been them versus a governmental entity.
Robert, was any federal funds used for this sidewalk repair stimulus money?
I don't know.
Because I think you cannot use federal funds within the historic district to do such things as that without, with appropriate approvals on that. And the other thing is that we're a certified local government, which the city council was approached, they accepted, and we are one. And that is a entity, an association, collaboration that also helps fund preservation-related projects in cities. We've talked about it and how we might use that and to get grants to produce pamphlets, brochures to promote preservation. And I did speak with the State Historical Commission, and they said that it is indeed an issue that could affect the city's ability to get grants from them since they approve that. So I'd like to caution the city when they go into an historic district, if they do affect the neighborhood, you may lose the ability to get federal funding for other projects. And it may be that, the congressmen that represent this city and this state and county may also see it as that, well, if they're tearing these things out, that we don't care, so why should I go to get money to help out the city? So I'd like to sincerely caution the city about doing things like this when we have accepted being a national district. Both the homeowners, the city council, and the city approved to do this, and then we become a certified local government, and we're pulling up the original building fabric that makes this place unique. And it is one of the drawing attractions for public outside our community to come in and look at the East Main District. I know before I moved here, I'd love to come down and drive down East Main and see the old houses. And this is a loss of integrity. If you keep whittling away at bits and pieces and replacing it with new stuff, sooner or later all you're going to have is the doorknob that's historic. And all the houses are replaced, and nothing's old about it. And so I'm concerned about this approach.
I have one last comment, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure, but I don't think anybody was contacted here on the board prior to the bricks being torn up. But I believe, Robert, you and David must have had some idea what was going on because you were part of the conversations, and I would just ask you to be our eyes and ears and at least let the chairman know what's going on if there's any opportunity at all that's going to impact our district. And we might not have been able to stop it, but if we'd have known beforehand, we could have maybe put some brakes on.
I agree.
Well, I do want to say that I was not involved in any of the conversations about undertaking this project. I was not aware of it until it was had started, and there were some complaints and probably the first letter in the paper.
See, that's another problem, since you're the attorney representing us.
Yeah.
And evidently your superior was involved in it.
I do not know whether Ms. McGannon was aware of the project before it started or not. I mean, there certainly are a number of these kinds of city engineering, city maintenance projects that the decision to undertake it is not one that they're going to consult with the legal department with, and particularly when we're using a combination of our own city staff and a contractor that we have on an annual time and materials contract. So we didn't take bids to replace these sidewalks, publish it as we would have if we're building a new 2-mile stretch of highway. It was done, rightly or wrongly, it was done as essentially a routine maintenance. This has been a problem. We can fix it now. Let's go fix it basis. And on something of that nature, the legal department's not necessarily going to be consulted. Should we have been consulted about it being in the historic zoning district? And again, I do not know for certain that Ms. McGannon was not consulted, but I was not. I do think that if that question had arisen someplace in those conversations, it would have been, we would have been consulted. But I know that the city regards the streets and the sidewalks, which in here are in the public right-of-way, that are under the control of the city, that we regard that as not within the purview of the Historic Zoning Commission. And I'm not here to argue the point that that's the correct way to look at it or not, or whether there could have been discussion, even if legally and technically we do have the power to do that, whether there could have or should have been some discussions about it. But that is the city management's position on that. And of course, we as a city have responsibility, and there have been some claims. I'm not sure there have been any big claims, but some discussion of claims of people tripping, and there have been problems. And whether it was the right decision or not, the decision was made to replace these with concrete. Of course, that not necessarily, I suppose asphalt would be cheaper than concrete, but that's not a very good sidewalk material. Doing the straight concrete is certainly cheaper than replacing the brick, and it's also cheaper for a future maintenance issue, which of course is always a concern. But the fact that it is within the right-of-way, and there are areas of town where the sidewalks are actually truly on private property, they're not in right-of-way. But my understanding, at least, is that in this area, the sidewalks are all within the street right-of-way. And the city management regards this as is not within the control of the Historic Zoning Commission.
The map, here it says the brick sidewalk replacement. What is the origin of that map? Is that something you put together, or?
That is something that the engineering department went out there with their inspectors, and they located properties just by a visual survey, street survey, or a windshield survey, and they noted which properties had brick sidewalks in front of them.
So is there a broader map that says broken sidewalk to be replaced, or did they just target brick sidewalks at those some 24 properties?
I think there's about 30 total properties altogether, and there's about 10 inside this historic zone. But all of these orange properties had brick sidewalks in front of them. Now, there may be buckling concrete sidewalks elsewhere. I don't think they were put on that map, but they were going to fix those as they come to them.
Was this map put together after the ones along Main Street were pulled up, just to identify other brick areas?
I think it was before.
Okay.
They were showing the total number of properties that had brick sidewalks and where they were located.
So I guess what I'm wondering, was it just targeted to go after the brick first versus the buckling concrete?
You know, I wasn't included in the beginning of these discussions, and I'm just trying to remember what they were saying. I think they were targeting just brick sidewalks.
Yeah, that's what it appears. If that came from the Public Works or engineering.
Yeah.
I don't know the origin of that.
I mean, you would think it would be a broader map of some type that would say, these are our locations for sidewalk repair, and as a part of that component, there are areas of brick that are rated poor to acceptable.
Mm-hmm. And in some instances, some of these bricks sidewalks may not have been as bad as others, but just given time, they have a tendency to deteriorate and fall out of levelness, and you know, they can cause a problem with the pedestrian public.
Yeah, I can remember when we did the downtown improvements and putting all the utilities underground, in the decision at that time about putting the brick crosswalks in.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a decision made to, among other reasons, you know, because of the historic semblance of it, was to add something back to the downtown area with the brick at the crosswalks.
Any additional questions?
Jim, I'd just like to, I think, reiterate what Mr. Becker said, and I want the public to be to know, and the city to be clear that we should, first of all, that we should have been notified, and secondly, what are we doing here if our powers are being basically ignored or taken away from us? And as David said, it goes back to the same thing as when the county decided to put up a chain link fence and refused to work with us. So we feel powerless, and we feel like we're not able to do our job as a commission if we're not kept in the loop.
At this point, certainly we wouldn't want anyone to have a hazardous walkway, and you certainly want to meet ADA, but for safety purposes and for accessibility. But on the other hand, what has been done, is there any way to say, okay, let's kind of slow down a little bit and compromise and maybe look at how to reuse some of that or give it a different flavor or a different, some other options that are not going to totally change all of Main Street and then all of the other areas of the historic district? Is there any way to kind of slow down and reevaluate?
I mean, I can approach the city manager, and he can watch this rerun during the month. He was busy all day today, so he couldn't attend this. And I can talk to him, and he can listen to this, and his is the ultimate decision on this, and he can take it into consideration on what he's going to do.
I'd like to add one last comment, too. I went on to the Murfreesboro City website, and I pulled up historic zoning, and I went to the facts section of it. And in there, in the first paragraph, and I have copies for you all, you're welcome to these if you like now, if you'd like to come get them. But basically it says the certificate of appropriateness requirement applies not only to homeowners, but to businesses and government entities to the H1 zone as well. So it appears that your own website says that government entities should have come to us. It does say, however, lower in that same page, it says activities that do not require a certificate of appropriateness are repairs to walks, driveways, fences, and patios. I would argue that this was not a repair, but a replacement, and therefore something new that should have been brought to us. But your own document, the city's own document, says the requirement applies not only to homeowners, but to businesses and government entities. And I would say the city is definitely a government entity. It's your own website. Anything else from the commission at this time? Then we'd like to, if not, have the public speak.
Can I just ask a question? This was done, Mr. Lyons just took over just a short time ago. But this was done prior to Mr. Lyons taking
I think the whole
wasn't it?
process started before that, yeah. I don't think it's
So,
completed
yeah.
yet. Yeah.
So Mr. Lyons, was he even in on the decision that you know of?
In our meeting, he wasn't there. It was just Mr. Haley, Ms. McGannon, and the city engineer himself. That's the one meeting I saw. I was at.
Maybe we have hope for Mr. Lyons, giving us more notice the next time we're working with us.
Anyone else from the commission at this time? I'd like to open it then to anyone in the public who'd like to speak. I would ask that you please come again before the podium and state your name and your address, and if you would, limit it to 3 minutes, please, so that everyone has a chance to speak. So please, whoever would like to speak first. Yes.
My understanding...
Please state your name.
I'm sorry. You did say that. I'm Dr. King Jameson. I live at 520 East Main Street in the historic zone. My understanding is entirely different from the city's understanding. And the ringing statement from the zoning ordinance makes me feel that way. The Historic Zoning Commission shall have exclusive jurisdiction relating to historic matters, anyone who may be aggrieved, and so on. And in additional duties in the zoning ordinance, it says, in the paragraph before that is stating, additional duties and powers, it shall be the duty of the Historic Zoning Commission to make the following determination: appropriateness of front yards, side yards, rear yards, off-street parking spaces, location of entrance drives into the property, sidewalks along the public right-of-way which might affect the character of any building or structure within the historic district. That was not done. It's a violation of the ordinance. I gave up a great deal of property rights when this ordinance was put in place. And for the exchange of those rights, these items of the historic zoning ordinance were put in place for this commission to be protective of those rights that I gave up and granted to the city. and I want them protected, and I want them dealt with. I have received a letter from the city engineer which you did not have privy to.
Would you please
Continue speaking.
King,
Microphone.
into the
I
mic?
have a letter from the city engineer which you do not have privy to. It was prompted by my calling every member of the city council and complaining about what they have done and reading them the portions of the the zoning ordinance. If I may approach, you may have a copy of this letter. It shows complicity of every official in the city, including the attorneys. And then I wish to speak on what I did as a result of receiving this letter. May I approach?
Please.
It shows that no one in the city intended to contact them in violation of the city ordinance, which says that this commission must be given ample time to review any project that's going to be started in the historic zone and given ample time to make written comments. Neither of you, none of you, ever saw anything about that. It is a blatant violation of this ordinance, which is my protection for giving up my property rights. Now then, shall I give you time to read that letter, or?
This is the same letter that we did receive in our package, it appears to me, the same letter
You
dated
were not
July
on the copy
30th.
list, so that's the reason I said that you did not receive a letter of it.
We
Copy
did.
of it, excuse me.
We did.
That's okay.
Is that Chris's June 30 letter?
It is the July 30th letter.
July 30th.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the city's response back to
After
Mr.
receiving
James.
that letter, which it seemed to me that none of the Historic Zone Commission got, but see, I wrote everyone else on the on the City Council, thanking them for that documentation, and I'll bet you, if you look at the date, that the mailing address was, they thought they ought to send you that letter after I wrote all of them, thanking them for the documentation. Now then, I took this letter to the district attorney and shared it with them, and a spokesman for the district attorney said, "It looks like the city is going to fight you on this. You will need a lawyer." I said, "Well, can the Historic Zone Commission sue the city?" Because in my ignorance, I asked that question in that way. He said, "Yes, if they support your position." There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes.
I'm Carol Linlow. I own property on East Main Street in the 600 block on the corner of Hancock and Main. I'm going to be much more emotional than Mr. Jameson. I think people that did this, who were responsible for this, are insensitive, and they just don't care about the property owners. I personally called the project manager on this. It was listed in the letter they sent us, and asked him to please not do it. I said, "Have you run this past the Historic Commission?" And he said, "It's already been decided." So I did call Mr. Lewis and left a message. He did call me back, and more or less his answer was that it's already been decided they're going to do it. It's like a bunch of Philistines are here. You all are supposed to be informed and protect the historic district. You've just been totally disregarded. It's insulting. I personally picked up every brick in my sidewalk and relayed it. So it wouldn't be dangerous. And I think this idea that they didn't know what they were doing or it's dangerous is a bunch of baloney. They could have relayed that sidewalk. Now that it's done, you can't replace it. It'll never be the same again. Anyway, I just want you to know how much we care and how bad I feel about it.
Could I ask you one question? Are you the lady who would constantly pick up the brick and I'd see a bucket out there on the sidewalk and you'd relay it every few months?
One and the same.
I always admired the fact that you did that. I drove
Well-
by every day coming to and from work when I used to travel that way to work in Nashville, and I used to always
If I
think,
may-
there's a great citizen who is taking care of this public sidewalk.
If I may give you a little history on that, my sidewalk was uneven. And I came to the city council or the historic district, I can't even remember who, and asked them if I ran into some big roots, would they help me? And they said, no, we won't help you. We'll replace it with concrete, but we won't help you. So I did it myself, and fortunately didn't run into any roots. But with the amount of expense and labor they went to rip everything up and replace it with concrete, it's like putting vinyl siding on Monticello.
Good example.
It's just awful. If this, whoever the city manager is, should be reprimanded, whoever made this decision. If not, lose his job. I'd fire him. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes, please. If you would state your name and your address.
I'm Nina Egley, and I live at 602 East Main. And you were asking about the notification that we received when they took
Yes.
the bricks out in front of our house. And I went to the mailbox and got the letter, and it said that the sidewalk would be replaced sometime. It wasn't a very definite time. So I carried I never knew how much I loved my sidewalk until I opened that letter. And it was just like a huge loss right at that moment. And I just carried the letter in and called immediately to speak to the person whose name was on the letter. And I tried several times and I could leave a voicemail, but I could never speak to anyone. And I went on vacation maybe 2 days later, but I told my next door neighbor, ask her if she'd received the letter, and she hadn't. But I told her what was going on and asked her if she would continue the effort to reach someone from the city. And I knew she's a good watchdog. And I also left on one of my voicemails, if they did come and rip out the sidewalk, could we at least have our bricks? And my wonder is, well, every morning I eat breakfast right on the street, and one morning I just heard all the machinery coming in and went outside and said, can I have my bricks? And I'm just curious, since it was mentioned that every homeowner got to keep their bricks, if I hadn't been standing out there on the sidewalk to say, can I have my bricks, if they would have given me my bricks, if I would have been offered my bricks. And if you'll come to my house, you'll see how beautiful that sidewalk once was, because we saved them.
It looks wonderful.
Thank you.
You've
It
done
was a
grand
beautiful
job.
sidewalk.
It was a huge amount of labor.
So we were given a letter. Oh, and when the people came to take the brick sidewalk up, I went outside, and the man said, you have signed a paper that says we're allowed to take the sidewalk up. I said, no, I have signed nothing of the sort. And I said, does that mean if I tell you right now, I will not allow you to take the sidewalk up, that you'll leave? And he said, no.
What was the time lapse between the time that you received the letter and the actual
I think it was early June that I received the letter. I just last week threw it away. I've lost track of time. Mid-July when they started taking up the sidewalk.
Does anyone know what that time lapse was by any chance? Between the time that the letters were sent out and actual construction took place?
Maybe a month. I guess so, but again, it was a rather, this will be done, no specific time, calling the person, not getting any sort of clarification about when it was going to be done, and getting no response, and wondering if we would have gotten our bricks if we hadn't been out there to request them.
Well, I'm curious about the man saying you have signed a release form or a consent form.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone else have this experience?
I went to my next door neighbor because I was getting in my car to go to work, and I said, they've started, if you want your bricks, get out there and campaign for your bricks. And I said they told me that they had a signed document with my name on it or a release allowing them to take out my sidewalk, and she said that they did the same with her.
If you're speaking of Marie Miller, she called me personally.
I
She
am.
said the same thing, that she was told that she had signed a waiver, and she told me she had never signed anything.
Nor had we been told that we had any options or any recourse or anything like that. So that's my experience.
You know, today we're all talking about bricks, but there's also another feature that no one's mentioned, is the fact that between the curb and the sidewalk that was there were these stone, I call them carriage blocks, that you'd step out of your car or your
They got
carriage.
left.
And I always remark driving down East Main how many of them were still left. Those have also been pulled up now.
No, Marie's wasn't.
Marie's wasn't, but a lot of them, well, it was probably because she sat out there and said, no, you're not taking
She was going to stand
it.
on it.
But the rest of them I see also piled in people's yards, and they were not put back, and that's an unfortunate thing we've lost too, because it was very unique how many of them
we
were
didn't
still
have
left
that, but-
along East Main, and now we have precious few of them left. It was wonderful.
But anyway, that's...
Ms. Egley,
that's what happened
didn't
to
you
us.
use your stone pieces to edge your
We did.
walkway? Yeah.
Well, I got home from work, and it really did look like a Stonehenge in a brickyard in my front yard, with all of those things lying around. But
Yeah.
we used as much as we could, and we saved the rest, and hope maybe we'll be able to find a suitable project for those.
See, the original brick was edged by those stones, and when they dug it up, a lot of it was under the grass and not seen.
Yeah.
But all of that has that stone edge along it.
It's
The Egleys just
Just beautiful.
reinvented it and redid it and put it on their own sidewalk.
That's great.
I was walking that morning and came upon that corner right, I guess they had already started. They had started. So I was like stopped, asked what they were doing, and it was the Rollins contractors. I think so. And then I said to the men, who's in charge? And they pointed me to some other, to some other man. And so I went to talk to him, and I said, what are you doing with the bricks? I mean, because you didn't want the bricks just to go away and be hauled off and vanished. And that's when he said, we're giving them to the homeowners if they want them. So I said, well, thank goodness. They'll take care of them at least.
Is there anyone out there in the audience who would also like to speak? Please.
I'm Chuck Clark, 135 Cherry Lane in the Historic District. Most of what I'm going to say is just a recap of what we've already heard, but the main point we have to agree on here is that the city ignored its own rules. There is an overlay that does protect this zone even from its own government, and it's written that way. The assertion that right-of-way and sidewalks are exempt is just not true. The whole notion that this is an ADA issue is absurd on its face because we're putting brick everywhere else, and that doesn't seem to be a problem. And my wife was in Boston recently and said, gosh, Boston's got more ADA lawyers than you can stir with a stick, and they've got more brick sidewalks and cobblestone streets than any city in America. And that's true, too. So ADA that's sort of specious. And to use ADA as a risk management tool, nobody's doing any risk management here. This is risk avoidance. You don't need an attorney to say no. That's a bogus claim as well. If cheap and easy are your only criteria, you just don't have enough criteria. And I think that because most of the brick is still available to us, that the sidewalk should be removed and replaced with the brick that was there to start with. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else, would you like to speak? Is there any further comment from the commission? Questions?
I would just like to thank all the audience for coming down and giving your comments. It means a lot to us as a board. Thank you.
The chair would welcome any motions or any action by the commission.
I think we need to talk about this a little bit. Do we want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I know it's maybe out of order, out of time,
That's
but
okay.
I respectfully request that you take some time to deliberate on this, and I'm going to be on the agenda next time, I'm afraid, and I'm going to give a full report of all my activities and tell you who I've talked to and what they said, and make some recommendations and let you quiz me and grill me, and I wish you'd wait and give it ample time to simmer.
Thank you.
What I would like, Mr. Chairman, is even though Mr. Haley is retired and gone, I would like to ask Robert to coordinate a meeting with Mr. Lyons and Ms. McGannon and David and with our board prior to our next meeting. And if it can be done on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:30, that's a time slot that we can normally slot in. But I would like to be able to look in their eyes and talk to them and see where we're going in the future.
I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Ives.
Please.
Good. Mr. Ives, is a commission such as this, is it more appropriate to make a motion of a request directly to the city council on a matter such as this, or is it more appropriate to direct it towards the city manager's office?
I'm not sure I can give you an answer to that. Certainly, the overall management of the city, certainly the day-to-day management of the city is in the hands of the city manager and the city manager's staff. On the other hand, I think all of you folks were appointed by the mayor with the concurrence of the city council. I'm not sure that I can say one would be more appropriate than the other.
If you
And I haven't answered this question before, but as I sit here, I don't think that either would be inappropriate. I think you certainly would be entitled to convey your thoughts to the mayor and council.
If you felt there was, I'm sorry.
But if your communication went directly to mayor and council without going to city manager, I think that the mayor's first step would be to send it to the city manager and say, what's this about, or tell me about the history of it, something of that nature. So I don't see any objection to you communicating with council, but as a practical matter, I think it also ought to go to city management.
So you think the appropriate protocol then would be to the city manager's office?
I believe so, but I can't tell you it'd be inappropriate for you to contact council people.
And if we felt that someone had violated the ordinance, who should we direct that to for correction?
It can come to me as sort of your city legal department representative. It ultimately is going to go to Ms. McGannon. Whether you send it directly to her with a copy to me or to me to forward to her, either way. And certainly city management will be, the city manager's office, and at some point certainly mayor and council will be aware of the concerns that are expressed.
I guess what I'm concerned about is just having them visit here and not give them a motion of some type to say that we think that there was a gray area and or an absolute black and white issue, and we'd like to have it corrected. Now, also, let me ask one more thing. Was it for sure that each of these properties, that the sidewalk was in the public right-of-way and that their deeds didn't call for those property lines to extend to past the right-of-way to the edge of curb or center line of the road?
It's my
Any
understanding
research?
that all these properties, brick sidewalks were in the right-of-way.
So the legal description of each of the properties carried that property line to a point that was just short of coming up to the sidewalk.
I have not looked at these legal descriptions, so I don't know what any of them say. But the legal description does not, if a legal description calls for the property line being at the center of the roadway, doesn't take away from the fact that that doesn't establish where the right-of-way line is.
Correct.
Right-of-way can overlay that, and whether that the extent of that overlay, of course, can always be a question. But I think we have uniformly, as I understand it, and I'm relatively new here, been here now a little over 4 years, but my understanding is that sidewalks have always been, in this area at least, are treated as within the public right-of-way. And I cannot give you a formal legal opinion that says all of them are, but that's my understanding of how they've been treated.
One question. Have all the brick sidewalks in the historic district that are now part of this map been replaced?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not involved in the project, so I don't know.
The question is, can we stop them for now until this is decided within our district that they not pick up any more brick sidewalks and replace them until we decide this issue? We do a stop work order on those brick sidewalks being removed in the district. We don't have any control over outside the district. We think we have control. We're hoping you'll prove that for us from what we've seen and what we've heard today, that we do have some review capability of the district. So if there are brick sidewalks that have not been taken up, I'd like to see that you stop picking them up now until it's resolved.
I would suggest a motion to that effect from the commission, and we will certainly relay it to city management. And I don't know what, I don't have the authority to respond to that, but certainly a formal motion, assuming it be passed by the commission, we will take it to them.
Any further questions?
Well, I'll make that motion that we request that, as a result of this commission, we request a stop work order on any red brick sidewalks that are in the Main Street Historic Zone, and until we have the ability to have a session with the city manager.
That's good.
Do we have a second?
I'd like to make a friendly amendment or addition to. I'm not
Okay.
sure I may be out of order.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I would also like to request, if possible, that while we don't have purview outside of the district, that perhaps those other sidewalks that are being removed, that those bricks are at least saved in case we need to use them for other projects, or we can be creative and use them in a project so they're not totally just lost and thrown away.
And perhaps if we are able to replace the sidewalks in the district that have been picked up, maybe we could take that brick and put the brick back in the historic district.
Well, I would suggest that we separate a couple of motions, and that I would second David Becker's motion
Make it separate.
without the second, and then follow up with a few others.
Do we have a second then to David Becker's motion?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Can you read that again for those who are taking minutes?
David, if you would repeat that, please.
Word for word?
As close as you remember, or that I would remember.
All right, I make a motion that there's a stop work order on any additional removal of red bricks sidewalks within the historic zone until we have an opportunity to have a session with the city manager.
With the clarification of that motion, is there any further discussion? If you're ready for the question, then, all those in favor of accepting the motion to do a stop work order on the bricks being removed in this historic district, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion then is accepted, and we extend that on to the city. Are there other motions to be made then?
I would like to make a motion that we also be careful about the use of the bricks outside of the historic district, that we place some kind of a way of saving those and keeping those for future use. And I know I didn't word that very well, but saving the bricks outside of the historic zoning area too.
Are you asking, I'm not sure my parliamentary procedure, are you asking that they not give them then to the owner, that they be
Or
collected by
at least
the...
somebody, keep them somehow, whether the owner keeps them, or, in other words, that they're not totally lost, and that perhaps we could use them for replacement or other
Maybe,
processes.
what if we just, let me try something.
Okay, I didn't do very well, did I?
What if we just ask for reconsideration of the removal of brick sidewalk elsewhere in the community until we have further clarification as to the powers of this board?
That sounds fabulous.
Is that okay?
Yes, I agree.
Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Request a reevaluation, removal of brick sidewalk outside of the historic zoning district until we have clarifications to the powers of this board.
Is there any further discussion on the motion at hand? If you're ready for the question, then, all those in favor of the motion as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion then is carried. It's approved. Are there any other discussions or motions?
Yeah, I have a, David had a good idea. When we asked for a meeting with the city manager and the legal department and whoever else, the engineer if need be, that it be on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:30, because we're used to coming, and that might be easy for
Yes.
people to meet at that time.
Now, would this be a regular meeting, or this would be a, just a, I guess it would have to be, wouldn't it?
Would have to be advertised.
advertised for a special meeting. Would this be considered a special meeting?
I believe it would be, yes.
We'd have to advertise, so I need a couple of days' notice to put an ad in the paper. So I will contact you as soon as I find out when, if
What
we can
dates
do
are
this, yeah.
Okay.
What date is available.
Rick, your motion asked that we defer that, removing sidewalks until we determine what power the board has. I mean, so are we presupposing that someone's going to tell us that, make that legal decision, or are we asking for that opinion from the legal department then?
Well, I want to go with a follow-up
Motion
for advice. It could take the form of, asking them that question, or it could take the form of that this board has decided that, yes, we think it is a purview of the Historic Zoning Commission to review that, and then let somebody come back and tell us, no, it isn't, that you've stepped way out of bounds on this, but we steadfastly believe that that's something that should have been here, or we could ask for Mr. Ives or whoever to research it, and if we take the position that, yes, we think it is something that is in our purview, then we'd ask for a correction be made, physical correction, and that the white sidewalk come up and the brick go back down. So it just depends on what collectively we all think. I don't know. Those are sorts of the things going through my head.
Well, when Mr. Becker made his motion, that the first thing I thought of, he said until we meet with I thought maybe we should go further and say, we're saying you can't, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Or until, it must stop until we say you can.
Well, I think probably we need some clarification, and maybe the people who decided in the city decided that they did have, that we didn't have any jurisdiction. We need to go over the historic zoning, what am I trying to say? Rules, not rules,
Ordinances.
but ordinances with them, so that we're all refreshed on that. That would be a good thing for us to do at the meeting, I think.
But in response to Howard's comment, the motion that you made, could you repeat the motion to the board so we make sure we understand the intent of it? Is it to stop it now or to stop it after we, is it tied to the meeting with the city manager?
I believe it is. believe.
For additional
Well,
removal
that's-
of red bricks within the city, within the historic zone, until the historic zoning committee can meet with the city manager.
So it's stopping it now.
Stop it. I'm glad I didn't have to repeat that a third time.
Too. That's why I asked. Is there any further discussion along this issue?
Well, for clarity's sake, we did, because I know we kind of worked on the second motion, we are saying that until that meeting too, that perhaps they shouldn't be just throwing away the brick, right? Just for my clarity. And also the carriage stones, that we're not losing those, that somehow they're being saved, even if they're outside the historic district.
Well, I would hope that if we missed in the wording of the motions somehow or another, that there would be enough compassion from the city administration to allow the board to discuss it with them without trying to dot every I and cross every T. You would hope that that would be the mentality.
Mr. Lewis and I will certainly make it known that the carriage stones are
Yes.
are a concern
I think
as
we did.
well, and if the city administration agrees to hold up while we take another look at this, I'm confident that that will certainly be included in, there would be no point to go out and pull up carriage stones
Yeah.
if we're not going to do
Well,
the
and
work.
also those other brick that are outside of our
Yes.
district.
Yes.
To just hang on a minute till we can meet and then not just do
And if-
away with them.
Yes, I understand. And if our city administration says, no, we're not going to stop outside the district, we're going to keep working, then they will. But if they do agree to a moratorium, for lack of a better word to go into my mind, then it would apply to everything, certainly.
Would it be could the board or any board request an expenditure of the city council be made to do some sort of public works activity?
I'm sorry, to do?
To a public works activity? Would that protocol go to the city manager?
Well,
I'm looking for a correction to the action that's taken place and
Understand.
authorizing of monies for that specific cause.
Well, generally speaking, of course, the budget is prepared by the city manager and submitted to council then for either approval or modification. My recollection of the city charter is that the city manager has pretty much exclusive authority to prepare the budget and propose expenditures. I'm quite certain that if council voted to essentially order city staff to do something in that arena, it would get done. I think the first request would be to the city manager in terms of the expenditure of money. I think that would be
And then he
the
would
protocol for
determine
that.
whether or not he needed to take that on to city council for authorization, or if it was included in budget items he already had available.
Correct.
Okay. I guess my thought is I would like to see some consideration somehow to reestablish the brick. But I don't know how you guys
I
feel.
think that's going to be the main line item on this meeting. And my thoughts anyways, Rick.
Yeah. I mean, because the map over there I keep referring to just said brick sidewalk replacement. Doesn't say.
Well, I mean, I titled
Thank
that.
you. Replace the brick.
I just wanted to have it a title so somebody knew what it was.
So the map doesn't have to change.
That's right.
Well, are we prepared as a board to make a motion that they replace the brick sidewalks? Or do we want to wait till we have a communication discussion with the city manager?
It's okay with me to have the communication and dialogue.
Mr.
and
Chairman,
see how that
yeah,
goes.
I think it would be good because I think, as I said,
Let's set that.
maybe the city doesn't know about the Historic Zoning Commission, and we need to reiterate what our charges are,
Yeah.
what we have been charged with, I should say.
Is there any further discussion? I mean, I'm happy as a board member to meet with the city manager and discuss this and wait till that appropriate time to go further with a motion if we need to.
Okay. That'll be fine.
Any further discussion?
I would not want to discourage you from making any kind of motion on that, but at the same time, I think the message will get heard, and whether or not it's I'm not sure it will really make any difference whether it's in the form of a motion that the sidewalks get replaced or not. I certainly think the message will be heard, and there will be a decision made at some point. I doubt that decision will turn on whether or not you've adopted another motion.
Yeah, okay. Makes perfect sense.
So in light of that, would anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
A second.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, we're then adjourned. Thank you all very much.